Once the trailer was released on YouTube on May 11th, 2019, the film received a mass backlash on social media for the film's perceived racism, sexism, stereotyping, and cultural appropriation. Yep. I know I made a promise a while back that I would do my best to stave off being one of those internet reviewers who tends to fall into an exaggerated persona or depend too much on hyperbolic statements of anger or frustration or nitpicking. I will try my best. It's going to be difficult. Yeah, so a couple weeks back, this trailer was going around for this little small indie low-budget comedy drama called Loqueesha, in which writer, director, producer, lead actor Jeremy Seville plays a bartender named Joe, who gives out great advice to his patrons, and with a son and an ex-wife demanding tuition for a prestigious school, tries to take on a radio DJ job or talk show host or advice person on the radio, and can't cut the mustard as himself. So, just as a joke, he starts recording little snippets of dialogue between himself and fake listeners on his smartphone, and takes on the persona of a sassy black woman named Loqueesha. And wouldn't you know it, Loqueesha becomes an instant hit. So they want her to be on the radio, so he has to do everything he can to be able to make the persona of Loqueesha vibrant and alive on the air, while still feeling like he has to be true to himself. But maybe being true to himself means that he really is, deep down, the voice of a black woman that he uses to exploit for financial gain. Fuck this movie. Yeah. When I saw this trailer, the first thing that came to mind was, well, I'm glad I'm never going to have to pay for a ticket to see that. Happy to say that I still haven't paid for a ticket for it, because it showed up on Amazon Prime for free. And my curiosity, god damn, my curiosity got the better of me. Okay. I'm going to try to wrangle in some of my baser impulses on this and try to be methodical. Try to properly contextualize or deconstruct elements of this movie as best as I can. Let's start with the genre. Let's start with the genre here. Drama, comedy type of film. Does it function on either of those levels successfully? No. A lot of it has to deal with the production value itself, in terms of the production value, in terms of the caliber of acting that we have to work with here, especially in our lead, and in terms of the overall story, message, moral that Jeremy Seville apparently wants to get across. Production value-wise, this isn't the worst low-budget thing I've ever seen, but it is low budget. Sets, dressings of sets are very bare bones. The bar that Joe works at doesn't have a front door. It has curtains. It has curtains. His love interest, when she first enters in the first 5 minutes of the movie, which already put me on edge because he used 2 different types of texts to intro his opening credits and title credits and everything like that. And I don't think that was an intentional choice or a comedic choice. I genuinely think maybe he ran out of that particular type of font and had to switch over to another one because of production cost. I don't know. But anyways, I'm off track already. Sorry. His love interest enters through these grand curtains flooded with light, and then immediately steps over to this rinky-dink bar. Production. Acting-wise, this lead, who's our writer, director, producer, I should remind you, why? Why would you give yourself this responsibility too, buddy? Oh, man. Oh, And this factors in a little bit too to the moral and kind of gimmick of the story, which is he is impersonating a sassy black woman on the radio, and he feels like this is something of an identity crisis for him for reasons. Yeah, he wants you to be taking this journey seriously. He thinks it's a funny, heartwarming, endearing journey that you should take seriously. That at its core is a moral about finding your true self. Fuck. There were times where I felt, no, he's going to start going into full-on parody right here, right now. But apparently, that's just him ramping up for the actual dramatic moments when he actually has an identity crisis of some kind and starts just randomly talking like Loqueesha and arguing with himself as himself and Loqueesha at once on the air too, calling in to himself to argue to himself about himself and his identity crisis and seeking counsel from himself and saying, no, this isn't schizophrenia or anything like that. This is just something I have to do. What? And the kicker of all that being none of that interaction is funny. And even worse is that you're supposed to take it sincerely. It's supposed to take it at its word of like his Loqueesha side is telling him that it's all good, that embrace all of you. The bartender, the Caucasian bartender side of you, and what you think is the experience of a black woman. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe whatever your creed, your orientation, your gender, however you self-identify, you should be the truest form of yourself possible. But hopefully you're doing it for more than just financial gain and maintaining a reputation and hoping you don't get the shit kicked out of you for lying. Because he's a liar. There is a point in this movie where at one point he hires a Loqueesha stand-in to make public appearances and be the face of the operation, and ultimately she ends up being our third act villain because mwahaha, she wants more of the money. There's a point where they have their final kind of meeting of the minds, and she says to him, you're a better black woman than I could ever be. I want to remind you all that he wrote that line of dialogue for this actress to say. And I had to repeat the scene again so I could see any kind of look on her face of the facade breaking of being like, did this stupid white boy really write this line? Because at the end of this movie, it's supposed to be sincere. Like, no, I'm living the best part of me as this stereotype personality that I just cobbled together with no frame of actual reference, with no actual speaking to the black experience, because, sorry to tell you this, Jeremy, you're not black or a woman. And as far as I know, your character in this movie has no drive to want to maybe transform themselves into black or a woman, which is weird because sometimes the identity politics thing does take root in their conversations in this movie, that they will talk about, like when he's having his identity crisis and he's trying to confide in his loved ones and his mom's like, if you need to come out, you can come out to me. He's like, Mom, I'm not gay. Or when he's trying to strike a mood with his lady love and he starts talking like Loqueesha and she's like, are you being racist right now? He's like, I don't know what I am right now, with his limited acting range expressed on his doofy face. Or when at a certain point she's like, oh, wait a minute, he's like, I feel like I'm a black man, or I feel like I'm a black woman trapped inside a white man's body. And she says to some point, he's like, are you a pre-op or something like that? Fuck you, movie. Ultimately, at the end of these interactions, it's not like, oh, this is like some lampooning type of thing, or this is like a Zucker or a God forbid, a Freeburger Seltzer type thing, where they're just being silly and doofy and offensive for offensive's sake or anything like that. No, at the end of this interaction, you're supposed to feel sorry for this guy. You're supposed to sympathize with his plight that he can't resolve, that part of his inner self is a sassy black woman. Except he's only a sassy black woman because he's trying to make money. They used to have they used to have a term for that way back in the day. It's escaping me right now. Editing-wise, this movie's kind of a nightmare, too. Scenes will just kind of start and stop interactions. Jarring, just like, okay, we're done with that scene. No establishing shot of where we are now. Just going from his bar, him handing a drink to his regular customer, and then boom, front door opening up to his ex-wife talking about the tuition. You might have noticed earlier I was talking about smartphones. The reason I'm doing that is because audio-wise, there's a certain point where he's waiting for an email on whether or not Loqueesha will get her own show, and the manager of the bar he works at is like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm checking an email on my..." And he says iPhone. He mouths iPhone. But what comes out of his mouth is smartphone. And she also says, "Oh, you too have a smartphone." But later on, someone says iPhone. Were they not allowed to say iPhone more than 3 times? Is that an actual rule in product placement and film production? Someone let me know, please. His producer and engineer for his show is black. So him explaining the plan to this guy for the first time ever, this guy takes it pretty well. In other words, unrealistically so. When he kind of divulges his plan to enter the radio station at night so no one can see him and take on the persona of Loqueesha for the show. Reality is, this guy would have gotten his ass kicked. Because that is crazy. That is batshit. And I know we're supposed to be in a wacky comedy where, yeah, crazy and batshit is the way of the world. But when it's trying to ground it with some kind of sincere moral of this guy's just trying to live his best self. Nope. And here's the whole thing. I know there have been movies out there that have, let's say, been a little transgressive about these topics. And in retrospect, maybe, yeah, they do need further kind of analyzation. Like, let's say, Tootsie, for example. Dustin Hoffman. Cross-dresses, but it's for a personal selfish gain that doesn't have anything to do with speaking true to his true self. Okay, sure, yeah, maybe in retrospect, you have to kind of look back on that to some extent. At least it was acted better and shot better than this. Even more recently, Sorry to Bother You. Sure, because I know there's some of you out there who might be thinking like, Mike, you hate this, but you like Sorry to Bother You, where the black people put on white voices? Yes. You want to know why? Because it's one little gimmick out of the whole surreal, crazy world that Boots Riley established in that movie, which is excellent, and you should watch that instead of this. But yeah, when Danny Glover puts on a white voice in that movie, does it come to mind being like, wow, okay, that's a little transgressive? Absolutely. But you know what? I'm not supposed to be taking that too seriously. I'm supposed to be soaking it in and having some amusement at that, at the commentary that it's actually providing overall in the story, because, believe it or not, Sorry to Bother You is not about, a simple moral of living your true self. It's actually kind of saying a lot of things about socioeconomic climates, about consumerism, about long-standing racial stereotypings and expectations. It's actually talking honestly and candidly about stereotyping. There are several different types of stereotypes that people use for greedy, self-beneficial purposes. It's reveling in that because it knows that's what the movie's about. It's not trying to play it off as being like, nope, this is about becoming a loving, compassionate person. That movie has mutant horses in it. It's not supposed to be friggin' taken seriously like this Hallmark spewing bullshit in Loqueesha. Concepts like this are transgressive, certainly, But again, context is very important. Another example in this movie doesn't necessarily have to speak to the race angle of it, but let's talk about mental health a little bit because this movie's hilarious when it comes to that. After he's had kind of a meltdown on the air, arguing with himself about self-identity, and Loqueesha has a proverbial talk down about to him, they then get a literal one when someone is about to jump off a bridge and they call into the show. And Loqueesha's advice of going to Paris and owing something to the person's future self. Sure. Being someone who has had to facilitate and counsel at times and offer some kind of processing for people who legitimately grapple with emotional, mental stress, verging into potentially self-harmful behaviors or suicidal ideation. All I can say is fuck you, Loqueesha. Like, this isn't hyperbolic statements. Like, this is where officially the movie lost me. The movie never really had me to begin with. I was like, I can't believe this is a thing that exists. I went from that to a point where they're talking about, well, maybe if we just kind of darken your skin and put you in a funny dress like Martin Lawrence in Big Mama's House, or all those Eddie Murphy movies. And there's a beat where it looks as though they're seriously considering it. I'm like, no. Even after that, as soon as we get to this point where he's trying to talk down a jumper with this fortune cookie bile coming out of this character's mouth, and that it's not supposed, it's weird. Like, it starts off like it's supposed to be a parody scene. Like, oh, this is something that the character is just going to say, and then the person will do it. And that's the joke because this isn't real. This is parody. It's like a Mel Brooks joke or something like that. No. And then it gets into like a serious conversation, but still spewing this nonsensical fortune teller bullshit. That's officially when this movie, I was just like, oh, a little something extra here. In apparent response to all the controversy and stuff, Seville tweeted a photograph of himself with Marlon Wayans, referencing his film White Chicks. However, Wayans stated that he hated when people tag me in their bullshit. It is annoying as fuck. Yeah. Yeah. Marlon Wayans wants nothing to do with your shit, dude. The dude can't act either. Like, even in this world where I guess reality and believability is bent to a sickening degree, like, it's clearly the same dude doing all the voices. And it's supposed to be taken seriously. It isn't like a Phil Hendry thing where, yeah, you kind of go into the Phil Hendry show knowing that Phil Hendry is all the characters, and sometimes he really doesn't make too much of an effort to disguise that fact. But no, here, like, it's played up for dramatic effect. It's played up to get the plot going. It's played up to be like, oh yeah, the line between Loqueesha and Joe certainly can be blurred quite a bit. It's the same fucking voice. He doesn't throw any kind of effort or transformation into his performance other than just being more loud. I know the guy thinks that he's probably got a sweet little message at the core of this. But dude, the phrase of the day, the term of the day for you is tone deaf. This is one of the most tone deaf attempts at a saccharine cinema experience I have ever watched. Well, I guess here comes the big part is, do I recommend you watch this movie? No. I know I watched it because I don't know any better and I am a glutton for punishment. I can't even recommend it as a so bad it's good because it's not The Room level of so bad it's good, where The Room is a masterpiece of everything going fascinatingly wrong, but you're still enthralled by it. Performance-wise, production-wise, shooting-wise, everything is just But you love that it's just because it just makes it a joy to watch and a marvel to see Tommy Wiseau unfold this phenomenon on screen. Oh, and it's also beneficial in knowing that Tommy Wiseau never tried to speak to the black experience. That's kind of a big old check. I promise I'll have more fun videos up pretty soon. I got a really good Ninja Turtles one. Ninja Turtles turned 35 this year, guys, and I want to celebrate that with you. And I will. But I just need to flush the last of Loqueesha out of my system.